So we've established already, in the world of the Transformers, anything can happen. It's more than meets the eye, if you will.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Generation 1 went in a lot of different directions to figure out what worked and what didn't for the series. We all know the classic battle of Optimus Prime and Megatron. It's etched into the stone of eternity at this point. But after 1986, it takes a wild turn into the world of space fantasy. While on TV, Rodimus Prime, RC, and Springer were tooling around the universe, Marvel Comics definitely took a different interpretation to this space fantasy adventure. Now, the Marvel Comics series was originally helmed by Bob Budiansky, and he's pretty much responsible for everything we know in Transformers. Budiansky came up with most of the names, the lore, the mythos, the character bibles, everything. Now, this was a classic Marvel work-for-hire gig. Not to say Budiansky didn't have any affection for it, but a job was a job, and he decided to sail off into the sunset. But much like any legacy, someone had to take the mantle, and that was one Simon Furman. Simon Furman at this time was working for Marvel UK, and the way comics were published over there were in a weekly format. These weeklies would reprint material from the United States, but sometimes supplement them with unique and exclusive stories, and Transformers was no different. And Simon Furman was kind of part of that British new wave of comic book writers that invaded Marvel and DC in the mid to late 1980s, along with Neil Gaiman, Grant Morrison, and the second angriest man in the industry, Alan Moore.
Leeches until they've gotten every last drop of the marrow from your bones.
Hey, Teacup, why don't you chill out?
Simon Furman's grandiose and cosmic style of writing really benefited the world of the Transformers. As we were transitioning our way out of the war on Earth, we started going out into a broad, scary, heavy metal-inspired universe. And the metalist of all characters introduced by Simon Furman was a freelance peacekeeping agent known only as Death's Head. The greatest hired gun in the galaxy. This is the 2014 Hasbro Marvel Infinite series, Death's Head, a 3 3/4 inch scaled action figure based off of his 1988 miniseries appearance. And this is the only action figure based on the original character created by Simon Furman. Death's Head 2 does not count, no matter what Marvel Legends wants to say. So if you're only familiar with Death's Head's appearance in the Transformers UK run, this look might be a little odd for you. Typically speaking, in Transformers, Death's Head is primarily green and a lot more angular and blocky. After his appearance in Transformers and Doctor Who, Death's Head got a redesign to go with his new miniseries. Redesigned by Brian Hitch, this look for Death's Head is a lot less heavy metal and 2000 AD inspired, and instead is a lot more homogeneous with the looks pioneered by Walt Simonson and John Byrne for the mid-80s. This action figure does a really good job of interpreting Brian Hitch's artwork into the physical form, and we see a lot of great details, panel lines, and sculpt work on the toy. This detail work extends from the Colossus-style ribbing on his limbs, the spiked knuckles, and all the scratches, dents, dings, and scuffs on his armor and weapons. Speaking of, Death's Head includes 3 major accessories. He has a buckler shield, a morning star, and a bearded axe. These weapons can all fit in his hand, and the buckler can mount on his forearm with a little clip. This shield can also be mounted on his back, Captain America style, and he can store his axe and morning star on these little clips inside. Now this is where the one major flaw in this figure comes in. He has a very large red cape that is connected to his shoulder pads. The issue comes in the fact that this is very stiff and rigid plastic. So while the figure has a great range of articulation and posability, it gets kind of handicapped by this stiff cape. This is actually a problem a lot of Marvel figures have, whether it's the 3 3/4 or 6-inch Marvel Legends. Now the Marvel Infinite series was a 3 3/4 inch scale toy line, but seeing as Death's Head is a giant murder robot, he's actually a little bit bigger than his contemporaries, clocking in closer to the 4-inch scale. So because of his slightly bigger size and general out-of-place appearance, he can actually fit in with a lot of different 3 3/4 toy lines, whether that's vintage G.I. Joe, Daypole Doctor Who, Star Wars Vintage Collection, or other weirdos, like this vintage Clint Howard action figure. But if you're watching this, you're a Transformers fan first, and you probably want to know how he fits in with other Transformer toy lines, and the answer is he doesn't. Not official ones, anyway. If you want to pair Death's Head up with anybody, you want to go with the New Age figures. New Age is a third-party company that specializes in small-scale, high-quality Transformers figures. They all range around about the 3 3/4 to 4-inch scale, and on top of that, New Age does colorways based off of the Marvel Generation 1 comics. So we've had a lot of things mentioned here. Marvel superheroes, Doctor Who, Transformers, other things. What does all of that have to do with Death's Head? Death's Head's first appearance is in the legendary Transformers UK number 113. In the future space year of 2007, Autobot leader Rodimus Prime puts out a bounty on the Decepticon madman Galvatron. In a hive of scum and villainy, we encounter Death's Head, a freelance peacekeeping agent looking for his next paycheck. And when someone drops the ball, he gets the call. Wanting that big-ass paycheck from Rodimus Prime, Death's Head travels around the galaxy and eventually finds Cyclonus and Scourge, Galvatron's lieutenants. And he discovers that Galvatron's pulled some time travel shenanigans and is now in the year 1987. Not letting something this trivial get in the way of a job well done, Death's Head decides to quantum leap back to the 80s. Rodimus Prime quickly realizes he actually made the situation way worse by hiring Death's Head, so he goes back in time as well. Galvatron wants to blow up the West Coast or something with a giant volcano, and Rodimus Prime and Death's Head intervene. Now, Rodimus wants to cancel the contract with Death's Head because he's a little too unsavory, and that lands him a spot on the bounty hunter shit list.
Jane Fonda, Daniel Shore, Jack Anderson. Hey! This is Richard Nixon's enemies list! You just crossed out his name and put yours!
In the fight, Rodimus and Death's Head both get beat up pretty bad, and are only saved by Wreck-Gar of all people. He uses the time travel device in a hope to return Galvatron to the future, but instead just teleports Prime and Death's Head back to 2007. Technically speaking, all of this is like part of the Time Wars, I think. Not that Time War, but who knows, maybe there's a Faction Paradox book all about it. Look, anyway, back in the future, Death's Head is hired by Shockwave to kill Rodimus Prime. It's a good job with good pay, and the benefits are even better. This is all a little bit of a ruse, though. Shockwave does want Rodimus Prime dead, but there's a little bit of a power struggle in the Decepticon ranks. Scourge and Cyclonus are getting a little too big for their britches, so he sends them to kill Rodimus Prime as well. The hope being, Death's Head kills all three. This all turns into a massive mess, though. Just one big fight, nobody knows what's going on, and Death's Head essentially falls face first into the Autobot base and is taken prisoner. New deal. Rodimus Prime is tired of dealing with Death's Head, so he gives him $10,000, a bus ticket, and tells him to go kill Cyclonus and Scourge. I don't want to see you again. Death's Head tracks down Cyclonus and Scourge to the planet of Junk, and he just thoroughly bodies both of them. But before he can do the deed and end the battle, a Junkion comes out of nowhere and tells him that he's their only hope. This begins Simon Furman's magnum opus, Legacy of Unicron. Unicron's head has taken refuge on the planet of Junk and is slowly transforming it into a horrific hellscape, complete with a death cult. Death's Head gets indoctrinated by Unicron and is sent to go across the galaxy and kill Shockwave, as well as all of Unicron's opposition. Death's Head is able to free himself from the mind control and has to team up with Rodimus Prime to defeat Unicron once and for all. The gambit is to use the Matrix of Leadership to defeat Unicron on like the astral or spiritual plane. But both Death's Head and Rodimus Prime are overwhelmed by the fact that Unicron is essentially an eldritch god. They're both on the losing side of this battle, but they're pulled out of the fire once again by the Junkions, who have planted explosives around Unicron's head and detonate them. Unicron's essence is trapped within the Matrix, and Death's Head, along with Cyclonus and Scourge, are flung through a time portal. This is where Death's Head diverges from the Transformers, because in the time vortex, he crashes into the TARDIS. In Doctor Who magazine number 135, which I actually have here, as signed by Sylvester McCoy, very nice space wizard, Death's Head crashes into the TARDIS and gets royally pissed at the Seventh Doctor. There's a chase and a runaround of Death's Head trying to kill the Doctor, and the Doctor actually uses the Master's, shrink ray from the Pertwee era to make Death's Head human-sized. Well, human-sized-ish. Eventually, the Doctor lets Death's Head commandeer the TARDIS, but that's actually a trick. He uses a time portal to get him sent, somewhere else. Some other comic no one's heard of. Oh hey, it's that comic no one's heard of. So in Dragon Claws, Death's Head appears in a future post-apocalyptic Mad Max UK. Our plucky team of adventurers encounter Death's Head, and he's an irritable guy, so they both fight, and actually Death's Head is blown up. I think a building even falls on him. He's recovered by a rival gang and rebuilt. This is where we get the blue and yellow design that the Infinite Toy is based off of. Now we have entered the Death's Head miniseries from the late 80s, and it kind of goes back to business as usual. Death's Head's back on his feet, he has a new adventuring companion named Sprat, and they make their way to cyberpunk future Los Angeles. We get back into the swing of things. Death's Head's back in the bounty hunting game. He's doing a good job. We're getting some fun adventures. And at the tail end of the series, he's hired by Doctor Who villain Dog Bolter to go and kill the Seventh Doctor. But that adventure eventually just leaves him stranded back on 1980s Earth, and he has to fight the Fantastic Four. Somewhere in there, he also meets She-Hulk, and I genuinely don't know where that goes in the Death's Head timeline, so I'm just putting it here. After fighting the Fantastic Four, Reed Richards sends Death's Head to the future space year of 2020. I'm sure nothing bad's gonna happen there. And that's where the miniseries ends for all intents and purposes, and so is this recap. Once we hit the end of the miniseries, we go to Death's Head 2. I don't want to talk about Death's Head 2, because Death's Head 2 is the worst of the 90s made into a comic book, and just destroys one of the best things Marvel UK ever did. Look, that aside, Death's Head is a very fun character, and genuinely one of my favorite weirdos introduced into the entirety of both Transformers and Marvel. And I feel like Death's Head's legacy still lives on in those properties. Obviously, superfan James Roberts loves putting 113 in all of his works, and Death's Head actually does get a cameo here and there in modern Transformers media. Unfortunately, these days, Death's Head does not get a lot of love outside of the cult fandom in Transformers, and I think that is because he is very much a product of his time. As much as I enjoy it, he is definitely heavily influenced by heavy metal and 2000 AD. He goes up on that Mount Rushmore with Tarna, Judge Dredd, and the ABC Warriors. I think it's that odd man out status, though, that makes him so interesting and so iconic. He doesn't fit in with anything, but he can go with anything. He can hang out with the Transformers, he can fight Doctor Who, he can hang out with She-Hulk on Earth, and go adventuring with the Guardians of the Galaxy out in the cosmos. And that is the 2024 Death's Head Day special. And I just want to thank anybody and everybody who stuck around in this video wanting to learn more about one of Marvel's greatest and strangest characters.